Well, Pitt missed out on a big recruiting target last night. Where does that leave the Panthers defensive back recruiting board? Notes on that, plus a local quarterback target to watch, some top rising prospects in Western Pennsylvania, and a lot more on this Thursday recruiting rundown episode of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pitt. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Rushing toward the end of the week with me, Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. It's the website Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Everything you need is right there at Panther-Lair.com. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. We're covering it there at Panther-Lair.com, and we're talking about it on the Panther-Lair.com message boards. If you're a Pitt fan, you like to talk to other Pitt fans, this is the place you want to be. The message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. People are literally on there all day, every day, talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. Go to bed. Before you go to bed at night, you check the message boards. You wake up in the morning, there'll be new posts, new threads, new discussions to read, consider, join, disagree with, argue about, agree with on occasion. There's a lot going on all the time. Panther-Lair.com. So go check it out. Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube page right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place where we put all of our Pitt video content, these daily Morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, our live Panther-Lair show, which is usually on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. We didn't have it last night, moved it to tonight. So mark your calendars. We will have a live Panther-Lair show tonight. Me and Jim Hammett talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting, and more. Right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. A little bit of a schedule change there, but if you have subscribed to our YouTube channel and you've got your notifications turned on, it should not be a surprise. Also, if you watch these videos, I've been talking about this all week, so it shouldn't be a surprise there either. Regardless, we'll be live tonight at 8:30 p.m. for the live Panther-Lair show. Tune in with your comments and questions so you can join the discussion and we can have a little chat about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. And it's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We appreciate that very much. Yesterday we ran down the running backs, kind of broke down that room, talked about running backs past, present, future, what that situation looks like at running back. Obviously, we've been talking a lot of recruiting this week as well. And we'll get back to the recruiting today, just kind of a roundup sort of thing. There's a number of recruiting news and notes to cover. And it starts last night with some unfortunate news. Look, on Tuesday, we broke down all the upcoming commitments and the dates and all that kind of stuff of about a half dozen or so top Pitt targets who are announcing their commitments soon. We broke that all down on Tuesday, talked about all those guys and when they were announcing and what we were hearing. And the first one came off the board last night. It was Coy Beasley, 4-star safety prospect from Cincinnati, and he announced his commitment to Purdue. Pitt, Purdue, and Wisconsin were his 3 official visits this month. Those were his top 3 schools. They were the schools he was choosing from. We thought Pitt was in the lead, and I think Pitt was in the lead until he took his official visit to Purdue and things sort of shifted. Now, I know your first reaction is probably the same as what my first reaction was. So of Purdue? Really? Is that really? Pitt lost not just Pitt lost a recruit to Purdue, but Pitt lost a defensive back recruit to Purdue? How does something like that happen? And I understand that response, and I think that's a natural response. And no disrespect to Purdue, but I mean, it's Purdue, right? But it's not just Purdue. It's Purdue with new head coach Ryan Walters. And you ask me, who is Ryan Walters? Well, if you haven't done any research or you haven't followed what we've written on Panther-Lair.com this week or if you're just not that tuned in to Big Ten football or college football, Ryan Walters was the defensive coordinator at Illinois the last 2 years. And in those 2 years, he has coached, in last year's draft, a 3rd-round draft pick, Kirby Joseph, who went to the Lions. And then in this year's draft, he had 3 defensive backs drafted, including the number 5 overall pick, Devin Witherspoon, who went to the Seahawks, plus a 2nd-round pick, Jartavius Martin, who went to the Washington football team. I'm going to keep calling him the football team because I like that name better. And then in the 3rd round, Sidney Brown went to the Philadelphia Eagles. So 4 defensive backs recruited or drafted in the last 2 years, all in the top 3 rounds, including the number 5 overall pick. And whether you want to say that Walters had everything to do with that or nothing to do with that, if you want to say, well, he was the coordinator then and he's the head coach now, however you want to sort of rationalize it, he can sell it. He can sell those 4 draft picks in the last 2 years, those 4 top 3 draft picks in the last 2 years. He can sell having the number 5 overall pick, a cornerback going at the number 5 overall pick this year. He can sell that. And as much as we've talked about Pitt being able to sell its recent draft success in history with Kalijah Cansey and Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison, I'm still claiming that. Pitt might not, but I'm going to. They want to sell all the success they've had putting defensive backs in the NFL. Look, there aren't many teams that can really compete with Pitt in that regard. When they're talking about DBs going to the NFL, I think Pitt has done a great job on that front, and I think they've been selling it a lot to the recruits. And recruits have been responding, understandably so. Walters and Purdue, based on what Walters has done in his past, can make a pretty compelling case against that. And you understand if that was one of the motivating factors, one of the driving factors that led Coy Beasley to pick Purdue. I don't think it's as much about being in the Big Ten, because if it was, you would think he'd go to Wisconsin. I think it's got to be about that defensive back development. And I know I often say that I don't think that, putting players in the NFL registers as much with recruits as we think it does. But I think sometimes there's some pretty compelling evidence, and I think in this case that was probably it. And so Pitt misses out on Coy Beasley. A disappointing loss on a number of levels. I mean, he's a really good player, but just as much, or probably kind of, right along with that, in tandem with that, is the fact that it seemed like Pitt had him. By all accounts, he was probably a recruit who committed to Pitt during his official visit, and committed with enough certainty to compel Pat Narduzzi to send out a Pitt is it tweet indicating that he had committed. And then to turn around and commit to a different school, announce his commitment to a different school, that's a bit of a, gut punch. It's an unfortunate turn of events. Not the first time we've had this happen, where Narduzzi has tweeted a commitment, and by the time the recruit announces, he announces that he's committing to another school. But still, disappointing in that regard. Now, I will say, and this is, just something that we'll always probably say, at least for a few years, about defensive back recruiting, I don't think we're generally too concerned with Pitt and defensive back recruiting, right? I'm not concerned about how they're going to do. They still have 4 commitments out there. Nigel Maynard, Alan Bryant, and Davion Pritchard, and Tayshawn Banks. You figure they'll hold on to at least 3 of those guys. And while we talked a lot about how they could sign a bigger class of defensive backs this year, and that they might need a bigger class of defensive backs this year just to make up for some gaps and some holes that are out there on the roster, if they end up with 3 or 4, that's still a pretty decent-sized group, particularly when you're talking about DBs who are versatile like this, who can play corner or play safety. And you'll probably get a couple safeties and a couple corners out of this class and last year's class as well. So I'm not too concerned about the defensive back recruiting. It would be really nice to add a player like Coy Beasley. It certainly is, extra disappointing given that he seemingly was committed and then ended up committing to Purdue. But I'm still, I can't raise too much concern. If they only get one of all these 4-star defensive ends who are going to commit in the next 2 weeks or next week and a half, if they only get one, then, you say, okay, that's too bad. Thought they might get more, but I'm not going to doubt them too much when it comes to defensive line recruiting. So defensive backs, defensive line, I just can't get too concerned about it, particularly because it's not like they're striking out across the board. They lost a guy. They missed on a guy, and that's disappointing. And these 4, how many 4-star defensive ends do we talk about? 4, right? Dominic Kirks and Elias Rudolph and Malachi Williams and Sincere Edwards. If they only end up getting 1 out of those 4, it'll be disappointing because you want to see them get more guys, right? You want to see them get more 4-star prospects and get more good players and fill out the class that way. But they've still got a bunch of D linemen committed. They've still got a bunch of DBs committed. And I'm at the point, and I think you probably are too, and if not, you should seriously give it some consideration. I'm at the point where, like Charlie Partridge, if he signs 5 guys and says, these are the 5 guys that I want and I believe I can build another championship-winning defensive line with, I'm kind of going to default to him. If Archie Collins and Corey Sanders and Pat Narduzzi say these are the 3 DBs or the 4 DBs that we feel like can build a championship defensive backfield with, I'm kind of going to default to them. There are some positions where I'm not necessarily ready to default to the coaches yet. And maybe this would be a good topic for another episode of the Morning Pit. Linebacker, I'm not there yet. I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. Offensive line, maybe starting to get there a little bit. Wide receiver, gonna wait on that one. Partially, at least in part to the fact that they keep changing receiver coaches. Quarterback, we'll wait and see on that one. I think you would probably agree. Running back, maybe to a certain extent, feeling a little, not entirely defaulting to the coaches, but closer than I am on some of these other positions. D-line and DB, though, I can't really argue. It would be better. It would look cooler. It would be more aesthetically pleasing, and certainly it would seem more promising on a lot of levels if they got a bunch of 4-star guys, if they got Coy Beasley and they got all these 4-star defensive ends and they filled the class with those guys. That would be great. We'd have a lot of fun stuff to write about and a lot of fun stuff to talk about, and presumably a better chance of the team being successful. But I'm kind of going to default here and say even if they only get one of these 4-star defensive ends, if they only get Sincere Edwards, and Charlie Partridge says, I like these 5 guys we've got of Edwards and Ty Uhas and Zach Crothers and Francis Brew and Jasir Winnington. He says, that's cool. I'm good with those 5. I don't need any more. I'm going to say, okay, Charlie, I trust you. If the Pitt, if Collins and Sanders and Narduzzi on the back end say, we like these 3 or 4 guys that we've got. We'll keep kicking the tires on a guy or 2 here, but we're good with these guys. We think they can play. I'm going to say, okay, I trust you. I kind of default to them on those positions. And there's something to be said here for recruiting at a certain level. And I think we all have to agree, or should agree, that Pitt has been recruiting at a certain level this month. With the recruits they've been bringing in, the commitments they've been getting, the guys they've been pretty hot and heavy with. Even when they don't get guys, when they miss on Coy Beasley last night, or if they miss on 1 or 2 or 3 or however many of these 4-star defensive ends, they're in that mix. And I know, I don't care about the guys that visit. Tell me the guys that commit. Well, I get it. But when you're recruiting at this level, you're not going to get everybody. You're going to miss on some of these 4-star guys. Pitt's been landing some as well. And I think my prediction from last week of getting 6 4-star recruits, I still feel confident about that. I think it's got a great chance of landing by the end, by signing day in December. But you're going to miss on, if you are heavily involved with more 4-star prospects, chances are you're going to miss on more 4-star prospects, just because the volume there. If you weren't really involved with any 4-stars, guess what? You wouldn't miss on any 4-stars. But they're pretty heavily involved with these guys, and you're going to get some and you're going to lose some. So it's a long-winded way of saying I default to the coaches on DBs and D-line. And when you recruit at this level, there's guys you're going to get and there's guys you're going to miss. And it doesn't mean it stings any less when you miss on guys, particularly when you lose them to Purdue. But it's just a reality of the situation. So we'll see where they go from. We'll see where they go from here. We'll see if they push to land some more DBs. My guess is they'll stand pat until maybe mid-season. Maybe some other targets will emerge if they decide they've got an extra spot and they want to take another corner or something like that. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if they end up just signing 3 defensive backs in December. But we'll see how that pans out. The other thing I wanted to talk about was quarterback, and we talked about this on the message boards and on Panther-Lair.com. Monday or Tuesday, I forget which day it was. We wrote about it and we talked about it. Quarterback developments. So Trevor Jackson has been, you reset the clock back to like the beginning of May. There were 5 top quarterback prospects. One has since committed to Duke. One committed to Texas A&M. One Pitt kind of backed off of, and now he's committed to Rice. And it left 2 guys, Henry Hasselbeck and Trevor Jackson, as the top quarterback targets. Hasselbeck seems to be trending toward Michigan State. Jackson's still out there. Not really clear what way he's leaning, but he took an official visit last weekend to Texas A&M. It's very curious because A&M has 2 quarterbacks committed. So, not really sure what's going on in that situation. Do you really want to be the 3rd quarterback in a class? Or is A&M going to make a move with potentially one of its 2 quarterback commitments, bump them off and take someone like Jackson? I don't know. I don't know what A&M is planning to do. I stopped trying to figure out Jimbo Fisher a long time ago. However, it's relevant to Pitt as Jackson was sort of kind of feeling like the last man standing in that group of 5. But over the weekend, a new name emerged. Well, not a new name. A name we've known for quite some time. His name, in fact, we've known since last spring when Pitt offered him. And it's Penn Hill's quarterback, Julian Duggar. Julian Duggar 6'3", 6'4", 205-pound quarterback at Penn Hills. He's a left-handed quarterback. Pitt offered him last spring and then really kind of backed off. I think other quarterback targets emerged. I think Frank Cignetti and when he was here, the offensive GA for quarterback coaching, John DiBiaso, weren't really sold on Duggar. Didn't really seem to be sold on him through his junior year this past fall. And there wasn't really a lot of contact. And like I say, these other targets emerged. Trevor Jackson and Henry Hasselbeck and Miles O'Neill and Drew Devilier and Tyler Cherry. All these guys emerged, and Julian Duggar wasn't really on the radar up until this past Sunday, when Penn Hills was one of the teams competing at Pitt's passing camp in the South Side, a 7-on-7 tournament. And they watched Julian Duggar. And I don't know if they necessarily went into the camp and said, boy, we really need to keep an eye on Julian Duggar. But they, from the sound of things, from everything I've been able to gather, they weren't really able to ignore him. As they watched him play, I think he really, really impressed Frank Cignetti, to the point where Cignetti said, okay, I've seen him throw, I've seen his accuracy, I've seen him read defenses, I've seen him move around, his athleticism, and I'm really impressed. Come up to my office. And so during the day on Sunday, in between games, after games, he went up to Cignetti's office, broke down film, got up on the whiteboard, and started doing sort of football talk to see if he could hang in that respect. And I think Cignetti came out of the whole thing really impressed with Duggar. Really impressed. Impressed enough that they, wanted to pick up the recruitment once again. And it wasn't just, for an afternoon. They reached out to him again that night. Pat Narduzzi texted him Monday morning. So ongoing contact and the relationship seems to be restarted. The recruiting seems to be restarted. And I don't necessarily think it's just a fallback panic option. Would they kick this thing into gear if they had a quarterback committed? Probably not. They don't have a quarterback committed though, and they just had a local guy, come on campus and really impress them with one of the better performances at a Pitt passing camp in a long time, from everything I've heard. I wasn't down there, but I've talked to multiple people who were, and they all were blown away how Duggar played. Like I say, he's a big left-handed quarterback. He's a good athlete. He's the kind of guy that when they offered him last spring, Pitt offered him as possibly a quarterback and possibly an athlete who could play another position, whatever that might be. So he's athletic enough for that. And I look at this, and rather than saying, oh, geez, they're striking out on other quarterbacks, oh, geez, this is a panic move, this is a fallback option, this is a plan B, I'm looking at it like a very, very low-risk investment here. If they decide to push for Julian Duggar, and I think if they do, I think they can get a commitment from him, which is kind of another important side point, that they're not pushing for a commitment right now. They're restarting that relationship and getting that communication going again, but they didn't push for a commitment on Sunday and say, come on, we need you here. You got to come and commit. Because I actually think there's a pretty decent chance he might have committed if they had. But they're not doing that. It's the preliminary stages, the nascent stages of restarting the recruitment. But I think it's low risk, because if they decide to push for him, and if they take a commitment from him, you've got a quarterback prospect who will take a few years to develop, but could develop into a really good player in a few years. He's got a lot of the basic natural tools to be a really good player with the proper development. And if it doesn't work out, you've got someone who's got the athleticism and the football IQ and the ability to probably play another position, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's tight end H-back, whether it's beefing up the defensive end or safety or linebacker, whatever it is. Probably not defensive end. That would take like 50 pounds or something. Or maybe a little bit less. But I mean, I think he's athletic enough that he could play a safety or an outside linebacker or something. So it's a low-risk move. He's a developmental prospect, but you've got some years to play with here when you've got Christian Veer for 2 more years after this. Nate Yarnell, if he sticks around for a couple more years. Ty Diefenbach there. And always the transfer portal to add more options to fill out the depth. You don't need the quarterback, whoever he is, in this 2024 recruiting class to come in and be the starter in 2024. You don't need that if you're Pitt. So you've got the luxury of taking someone that you can develop over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, which is probably what Julian Duggar needs, but I think he can be really good with that development, just based on everything I've heard about how he did at Pitt's passing camp. So I think that's really interesting. And we talk about local guys. I was going to get into some of the Central Catholic prospects who, just in broad terms, keep an eye on Central Catholic. They got a lot of guys. They got a lot of guys in these underclassmen groups. Pitt has already offered a few of them. They're going to offer a few more. I'm pretty confident. By December, by December or January, I would expect a bunch of 2025 and 26 Central Catholic kids to have offers from Pitt. But as we talk about local guys, keep an eye on Penn Hills. Whether Pitt pursues him or not, Julian Duggar is going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. I think he's going to be really good for Penn Hills, and he'll be a fun quarterback to watch. And he just might end up being Pitt's quarterback recruit in the class of 2024. So pretty interesting development there over the weekend, and we'll see where it goes from here. All right, more announcements coming up tomorrow. There's two commitment announcements. Maurice Schmorenzer, the offensive lineman from Virginia, and Dominic Kirks, the 4-star defensive end from Ohio. They're both going to be committing tomorrow. And then after that, you get Elias Rudolph on Monday and Sincere Edwards somewhere in the next week and a half as well. So could be a good weekend for Pitt. Could see some things go Pitt's way. We will have it all to talk about on Monday. But before we get to that, we've got our Morning Pitt mailbag tomorrow. So if you haven't yet, go on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, submit your questions to the mailbag thread, and we'll answer as many as we can tomorrow. Make sure to tune in tonight for the live Panther-Lair show at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss that. And I hope you have a great Thursday otherwise. We will be back with you tomorrow morning for the final Morning Pit of the week right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.